Hello again, YouTube peoples. I've debated if I wanted to talk about my sexuality in detail for a while now. I've done a live stream or two, but never sat down and discussed myself and this part of my journey in detail. Partially because sexuality is intensely personal, much more so for me than my atheism is, and partly because a good deal of the journey was painful, and often discussing it makes me stressed or angry. But it's Pride Month, and this is my first Pride Month where I've been completely out as an asexual. Well, at least here online. And just like my atheism, I do believe that sharing our stories helps others. So my story. Well, to begin with, it took me a long time to figure out that I was an asexual, because I never ran across the term in reference to human sexuality until I was 30. Like many LGBTQIA+ people, I had some feeling I was different from a young age. I just didn't understand how. When it really became apparent was my early teens. Friends and classmates started talking about the opposite sex and dating and movie stars and pop idols. And while I could see that some famous people were handsome and objectively beautiful, for me it was like looking at art. I could see that many of them were objectively good looking, but I didn't seem to have the same visceral reaction that others did. People would be talking about how nice it would be to kiss this or that famous person, or classmate, or friend. And I didn't really get it, although I would smile and nod and go along. I grew up in a smallish town, Wisconsin, in the late 80s to the mid-90s. I'd of course heard of homosexuality, and wondered if perhaps I was. Yet I didn't feel any attraction to women either. So as with many other asexuals, I assumed I was a late bloomer. I thought I'd come around eventually. I was shy and not very outgoing in high school. Spent a lot of times in books and with a small group of tight friends. Studied too much, worked too hard, focused on my college prep. And mostly that worked. If someone flirted with me, I often completely failed to notice until a friend pointed it out. And if they persisted, I got good at redirecting attention aimed at me onto others. I acted the matchmaker. And I played the game. Took what I heard others around me talking about movie stars and what I could personally see as attractive and parroted what I heard to fit in. Then, towards the end of my senior year, I agreed to go out with a boy who was a friend. I knew I didn't love him, and I knew I wasn't really attracted to him, but everyone else was paired up, and I remember being lonely and feeling out of step. We went out for 9 or 10 months, did some light exploring, and I started to catch up to the rest of my peer group in terms of practical dating and sexual experience. And again, throughout the relationship, although I had fun with him as a friend, there was none of what I could hear my friends about me describe. I didn't find either the foreplay or the limited sexual contact arousing, or particularly off-putting. It was just a thing. Eventually, the relationship ended when I felt like he got a bit too controlling, and I moved off to college. So here I am again in my late teens through early college and undergrad, and then getting my advanced degree. I managed to avoid dating for about another 2.5 to 3 years. I did explore a little with some close friends, but it never went very far. Now, in college, I had more access to the internet, and I began what would be a 10-year on-again, off-again search for what turned me on. This search, and this time, is when I really started to have a hard time. It seemed like no matter where I looked, I found nothing. What was I looking for? I was looking for something to light my fire, to turn me on. And I found absolutely nothing. I looked into the gay and lesbian. I read about transsexuals. That was an easy cross off. I've always felt comfortable in my own skin. I checked out the Kama Sutra and other books on sex. Oh yes, this is back when people still used libraries. And this was all done during my undergrad. And not all at once. I would pick up the search for a while, get frustrated, scared, lock it away, and go back to playing with my friends and studying. Towards the end of my undergrad, I formed another relationship with, I suppose I would now call him a young man. He was 1 year younger than me, and we had been friends for over a year. Once again, I knew that I didn't love him, and I wasn't attracted to him in the way other people described, but he was comfortable to be around, and I was tired of questions. Both the polite questions from friends Was I gay and in the closet? And, that's okay if I wanted to date girls. I had good friends in undergrad. And the ones that were starting to form in my head that were frightening me, which I'll talk about a bit later. I dated him for almost 2 years. And while there are many good memories, I will say it was not a healthy relationship. To begin with, we were not in the relationship for the same reason. I don't think he loved me. He's young, you don't expect that. But he at least liked me enough to date, and he was attracted to me. And I, to be honest, was using him to hide. I tried to be a good partner. I hid that I was never in the mood, and that the sex was boring to me. And before you blame that on him being young and inexperienced, please remember, I am asexual to the point that nothing turns me on. Again, I will get into that more later. And yes, our sex was vanilla. We were young and he was learning and exploring. But I'm good at research, and I had read a bit and was providing him with information. But I was also very good at avoiding full sexual intercourse, and worked hard to find other ways to provide him satisfaction when I could. Because the hardest part of sex for me was the pretending game I played. I wanted him to be happy, to think I'd enjoyed it. I did not want to lose him, and I did not want to hurt my friend. And this man was my friend. And I'm sure people are going to go, why did you hide? You didn't need to hide. Communication is important in relationships. Why weren't you telling him you weren't enjoying yourself? And you are right. 100,000 times right. I myself would advise anyone in a sexual or romantic relationship to communicate freely, openly, and honestly about their needs, about what they like and what they don't like. But please remember, I was in my early 20s. It was still around the turn of the millennium, and I had not yet heard the word asexual. By the time the relationship ended, I was starting to be pretty sure I was a freak of nature, if not perhaps a monster. So what do I mean by that outrageous statement? Well, I was about 23, 24 at that point. I had no apparent sex drive. I felt none of the desire to masturbate I knew that others did. None of the desire to have sex that I could easily see present around me. I'd had very few crushes on stars, and those were mild compared to what I'd heard others talk about. I watched the women around me closely and the women on TV to see if I was attracted to them. Nothing. By this time, I'd looked into BDSM, roleplay, and many, many other forms that sex and sexual attraction presents as. And nothing. Well, other than the occasional need to laugh insanely at the more ridiculous porn, which I swear is shot for comedic effect. At one point, I researched illnesses that cause low sex drive, and I talked to doctors and managed to get tested. Nothing. As time went on, I began to think I wasn't a freak, that maybe I was a monster. And that fear plagued me on and off for most of the rest of my 20s. So it would get to the point where I spent a few days popping around the web, reading and researching and going deeper and deeper down often terrifying rabbit holes for a few days, every month or two, and then I would literally just ignore the entire concept of sex in relation to myself for months at a time. During this time span, I was finishing getting my advanced degree and starting my career. So it was pretty easy to push off people trying to fix me up and offer dates by saying I was too busy studying or working. And I'll be honest, I must have given off touch me not vibes pretty well, because even though I had many close friends, there were fortunately not many offers or requests for dates. And so it went until I was about 30 or 31. And then reading a Sherlock fanfic, I ran across a story where the author described Sherlock as asexual and put him in a relationship with John. And I was confused and very upset. I remember reading the story and thinking, no, this isn't real. This isn't a thing. But at the bottom of the story was a website for the Asexuality Visibility Awareness Network, AVN. And my entire life changed. I clicked the link and started exploring the site. And then I spent the weekend in tears, sobbing in relief and pain and grief and joy. Because here was what I had spent more than a decade and a half trying to learn. And with one word, to know what I was looking for, I went from wondering if I was a monster to knowing that I was just one among a great many. The release that gave was profound. To know that I was not a monster and just another variation on the human model. Labels are often considered limiting. But in my case, finding a label, a description, and information was freeing and comforting. So after that weekend in my head, I identified as an aromantic asexual. I chose aromantic because I hadn't been in love with either of my previous partners and didn't really feel like I'd been in love with anyone so far, at least not in the ways I'd seen. And the asexual bit, that was obvious. That was what I had found. So I said earlier I'd talk a little bit about my sex drive. I have no active sex drive. I rarely feel the need to even masturbate. And as I indicated, I have yet to find anything that will make me either desire masturbation or sex. And since I'm sure the question will come up, how do I know that I don't just enjoy sex because I haven't had good sex? I will ask all of you allosexuals in return, how did you know you were going to enjoy sex, good or bad, before you had it? If you had bad sex, how did you know that you would enjoy good sex? How did you know when you were sexually attracted to someone? How did you know when you heard about that new position or role play or certain type of sex that it was something you were interested in or not? That's how I know. And while I have no interest in having sex, I do like the physical contact. I like cuddling. Some of my favorite memories with my second partner are when we could cuddle and I knew there was not a chance that he would want sex. I still adore cuddles and I'm a bit of a cuddle addict as long as I know my partner well and am emotionally attached to them and feel comfortable with them and that level of touching. Non-sexual massage, particularly giving them, is also very attractive to me, although I do enjoy receiving them from my current partner. I indicated earlier that I originally identified as aromantic asexual because of my history. I did get the aromantic part really wrong. Turns out I can and have fallen in love, much to my utter shock and initial terror. I'm not going to go into detail about my personal relationship with Alucard today, but I am going to touch on it here and there because as well as having been a life changer, both just in having the relationship, it has also allowed me to look back on my past and change a small bit of what I may have misunderstood about myself. Since falling in love, I have changed from aromantic to demi-romantic asexual. I need a strong emotional and mental connection with someone before I can fall in love. Falling in love has also, as I said, allowed me to look on my history and realize something. How I react to Alucard is very similar and has made me wonder if I wasn't in fact in love with a girlfriend in grad school as well. And that I didn't recognize it because it didn't have the sexual component. I even think I remember wondering multiple times if I was a lesbian in relation to her because of how close our relationship was. Now, there's a caveat on these memories. As we know, memories can be adjusted when you look back at them. I think that I felt this way, but we can't know for sure because I could be adjusting those memories. It doesn't really matter. Not to me anyway. But what I do know is I was heartbroken when she passed away about 9 years ago. And I still think of her many, many times a week. If nothing else, this amazing woman made a deep impression on my life. And it saddens me that I will never get to introduce her to Alucard. So well as demi-romantic, I am also apparently bi-romantic as well. Just some things I learn about myself as I age. I want to point out that I am not looking for sympathy or tears by posting my history. And while like many others, I have some mental scars from this, mine are mild, and the journey has brought me here, to a place in my life that I could not have imagined even 2 years ago. What I hope with telling my story is to provide encouragement out there to someone who's lost or doesn't understand. Just like talking about atheism, talking about our sexualities and our journeys, no matter what they are, normalizes them. I want to live in a culture and a world where no one has to spend decades trying to find information that they need to discover about themselves. I want to live in a world where everyone from asexuals to hypersexuals are accepted for themselves, where all adult consenting sex is treated as personal and private and unshamed, where sex is just another thing we can discuss freely, openly, and safely as adults. I hope that someday extensive sexual education and reproductive health, starting at a young age, is the norm and that it covers all of the spectrum. A sex education that actually discusses with older teens what the many forms of consensual sex could take and how to have a discussion with your partner to find safe, sane, and consensual agreements to enjoy and explore. I should have heard the term asexual long before my 30s, and it shouldn't have been discovered by accident. And while asexuals are now much more common online, in real life, I fear for all the children who have not heard of asexuality, much less are receiving inaccurate information on heterosexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, transsexuality, intersexuality, etc. No one should ever have to spend so long looking for basic, accurate information. And in the end, this is why I chose to share. So my shout out for this video is for Ansgar Odinson, who made my lovely new snail avatar. Thank you, Ansgar. I adore it still. If you have any questions for me and my journey, I will try to answer them in the YouTube comments, and I can also be reached on Twitter. Now, the single most important thing that everyone should remember: sing, dance, every chance you get.